Thanks for coming today. We'll be talking about APD and the city's actions at a property at Pennsylvania and Central. To start us off this morning, I'll introduce Mayor Tim Keller. We will give a minute to set
we'll
up.
I'm going to scoot past you, so I'll just hover over here.
No, it's okay.
Let's do some initials. So these are, why don't the RTC tell us what's on the screens while you get set up?
All right, sir. So on the left side, we have a traffic camera of Pennsylvania and Central. On the bottom, we also have a secondary camera in the same area. On the bottom screen, we're going to have multiple screens of areas within the city. On the right-hand side, we have a four-way view of the east side of Pennsylvania and Central, showing coming and going traffic. And on the bottom, we have the intersection of Pennsylvania and Central, so that we can monitor for any movement or crashes that occur in that intersection.
So this is Adam Mart. That's what we're going to be talking about here today specifically. Oh, also like that. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we're here at our real-time crime center, and we're focusing today on the issue of problem properties, essentially facilitators of crime in the Duke City. And first and foremost, we do want to share with you that on February 17th, we filed a motion to shut down this property right here, Adam Food Market. This is at Central and Pennsylvania. This has become the most dangerous intersection in the entire city. And I would venture to say, unfortunately, probably the state of New Mexico. And so when we look at situations like this, we understand that crime can go different places, it can move, it can shift. But when there is a place that is facilitating criminal activities, we have to do something about that, and they have to be held accountable. And that's what this lawsuit is all about. Excuse me. I do want to share with you some aspects of this, and then we're going to hear from our city councilor and APD about this. But at the end of the day, our officers, to put this in perspective, they've spent almost $100,000 of your taxpayer money cleaning up and policing that property. On top of that, there have been 500 gunshots at that property since ShotSpotter was installed. This property is literally out of control, and the city cannot afford, both for safety for citizens, people driving through that intersection, or for patrons of that property, we cannot afford to have this open. And the management of this property has not been cooperative in terms of what we need them to do to actually safely secure that property. And so we are taking legal action to make sure that they're held accountable. Now, some other aspects to this issue that I want to touch on. First and foremost, I was actually at the Real-Time Crime Center. From time to time, I pop in to check on things. This is a great place to do it. And I literally saw a shooting take place right on the screen as we're watching at this convenience center. You're going to hear stories from our officers and our chief about similar situations at this location. I also want to let folks know that this used to be the Senate district that I used to represent. I have been to that store many times, and it has gotten way worse. So I will tell you right now, for anyone who says that's always been a problem intersection, it is nothing like it is now in terms of violence. And we also have the data to prove that. But this is just the beginning of a larger project in which we are going to more aggressively pursue the facilitators of crime and the properties that facilitate crime in the city of Albuquerque. And so we're very grateful. Our council president, Pat Davis, has worked with us to beef up our code enforcement ordinances, and we're sending that down to council on Friday. That's going to be debated in public and so forth. It's very important that we pass that. When we came out with our broader picture around how we have to fix housing in our city, we outlined a spectrum of needs, and we've talked about housing, and we've talked about converting commercial real estate and casitas and all these things. Well, at the other end of this, is real, tangible enforcement of code. And that's what this ordinance is going to do. So it's another component in our Housing Forward plan. So with more on this project, I want to hand it over to our Chief of Police, Harold Medina. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. The property at the corner of Pennsylvania Central has been a challenge for years. In February of 1996, I was a brand new police officer just released off on-the-job training, and I parked my police car at the intersection of Pennsylvania and Central, and within minutes, I had my first stolen car as a police officer and somebody into custody. And over the course of the next 3 months, while I awaited the bid and where I was going to go for the next year, I spent a lot of time in that area. And I firsthand saw years ago how this was problematic and the amount of crime that was in the area. And it's never changed. But what's the one thing that's never changed is that there's still locations there for people to frequent. And I think it's important that our officers are out there on a daily basis dealing with calls for service. 6 homicides at or near the Adam Market in the matter of 2 years. And that's 6 homicides too many. If it wasn't shocking enough about those 6 homicides, 500 calls for service, 117 reports written in 1 year at that business. We have exhausted all city efforts to work with these individuals to try to make the property safer, as we do with many properties across the city. Everything from drug trafficking, receiving stolen property, tampering with evidence, fleeing and evading officers, assaults, and homicides have occurred in the past 2 years at this location. Think about the crime problems we were having at Coronado Park before we shut it down. There were 3 homicides, and now we haven't had any crime at Coronado Park. And sometimes we need to take these locations out of the equation. Moving forward with litigation is a last resort in attempting to, and the first step is always attempting to work with business owners. Citywide, we have hotels, we have rentals, we have problematic property that we need owners to take the initiative to ensure that they're working to make sure that their properties are not being a problem for all of the surrounding community who lives around these locations. And that's what we have here. The quality of life is lessened for those who live around this location, and it is imperative we do something to help increase their quality of life. Commander Luke Langwit knows the problems at Pennsylvania and Central, as he's been the commander there for the past several years. He firsthand has dealt with this problemed property. He's talked to everybody involved. It's his officers that are out there daily doing a job to try to keep the community safe. And it's time that we all step up to help make their jobs safer by eliminating these locations within the city where we know that crime is not being corrected and we're not getting the results that we want through enforcement activities alone. Commander?
Good morning. My name is Luke Langwood. I'm the Southeast Area Commander. Like the Chief had talked about, throughout the Southeast Area Command and other parts of the city, we identify hotspots or areas of crime. And what I like to do is I like to look at what is the underlying root causes of that crime. And a lot of times we find out that there are anchor properties, whether if they're residential or commercial, but that these anchors of crime is what's drawing the criminal activity to these areas. What's different about the Adams Market is that in a lot of the other high crime areas, you may have these anchor properties, if they're businesses, where they may just turn a blind eye to criminal activity. With Adams Market, they're not just turning a blind eye, they are involved in criminal activity. My officers are out there every day, between the patrol officers and our proactive response team officers. Every day we are out there. We've arrested employees, management, for violent crime, for drug trafficking. Because of the environment that Adams Market has allowed to happen over there, numerous individuals are there constantly getting involved into altercations, which leads to violent crime and that leads to drug trafficking. And it's impacting the quality of life of the businesses. I'm proud to have been working with the businesses in the area. We formed a coalition to really look at how we can stop the criminal activity that the Adams Market's doing. The amount of resources like the Chief had talked about, just because we are out there, every week we're seizing firearms, we're seizing fentanyl, and we're seizing other illicit drugs. We're making felony arrests on a every other day basis. The amount of resources put into responding calls for service at this property is alarming, not only for the safety of the community, but also for the safety of the officers, just because of the high volume of individuals that engage in criminal activity when they're gathered there on the property, next to the property. That puts a danger and a safety risk to our police officers as well. I work every day in this community, and we deserve better. We are doing what is necessary to improve the safety and the quality of life for the community. Through the litigation, the city is requesting a variety of tools to stop this criminal activity from occurring. It's an ongoing effort. This operation will continue until we can definitely put an end to the criminal activity. So with that, I'll turn it over to Council President.
Thanks, Commander. I have to say, like, the numbers are absolutely staggering, right? So often when we do these public meetings and we have all our things, the city council spends a lot of time asking APD or the mayor, why didn't this thing happen? Why didn't this work? But let me take this opportunity to say thank you. This is what we've needed. This is what we've exhausted, as the commander said, all of those options. This is the right next step, and we are going to clean up this city. And if you have property in our city that is facilitating problems for your neighbors, if it is facilitating criminal activity, we are no longer waiting. We are no longer asking other people to step in and do this. We're giving ourselves the tools to take care of our problems and to address them proactively. This has been a problem property for as many years as the chief has been a cop, which has been a few, I think, as you mentioned. But more importantly, like, this isn't just Adamsmart. This is the owners had different tenants there that have all had these issues. We've got a long list of problems. But we're doing something different, as the mayor mentioned, and I really want to say how great it's been to work with the mayor's office. Some of you remember just before COVID in the early days, before the shutdowns, we used our nuisance ordinance to go after a couple of other convenience stores not too far from here in our neighborhoods in southeast Albuquerque. The difference there was those owners and operators worked with us. They worked out a plan, they facilitated it, they changed their business practices to solve those problems to make it safer for their customers. Those tools worked. They don't work here. And so our new legislation that the mayor mentioned that's going to be introduced on Friday from the mayor's office and that I'm going to carry through the city council gives us new tools, including things like the ability to do civil enforcement against owners and operators if they allow this to happen on their property on an ongoing basis. And as we were talking with our code enforcement officers this morning, that's a huge piece for us, because what it means is right now what happens if you're an owner and operator and you get all the way to getting, say, a civil violation for problems with your property, which for most folks gets their attention. But if you're one of these people, by the time you get to Metro Court, our courts are busy, they have much bigger priorities to deal with, and it often doesn't get the attention that it deserves. But by creating a city process for resolving these problems with inspectors, with investigators, and a city hearing officer, we can address them more quickly for our neighbors and hold problem property owners accountable. This is a huge step forward. And you can see the resources we've brought to bear here. But imagine $100,000 in taxpayer dollars for one property in the city of Albuquerque. It's not sustainable, and I really appreciate the mayor and APD and our code department for working together to find a solution that creates a process to go after these serious problem properties. And so thank you. We look forward to working with it. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Council President Pat Davis. And we're going to take some questions if folks have it. We'll direct it to the appropriate person. But I think I do want to just summarize, this is an extreme example. I want to be clear, as the councilor mentioned, we work with property owners and management all the time. And we have an ADAPT program and a code program, and by and large, those things work. When people respect and work with the city, and listen to APD, listen to fire, we work together, and things like this don't happen. But when you allow and look the other way at 500 gunshots, when you cost the city $100,000, when you're responsible for over 100 various forms of citation and write-ups and criminal activity on your property, and you ignore APD and fire, and you thumb your nose at the city, we will shut you down. That's what's happening here. So with that, we'll take a few questions.
Maybe a question. You're saying there's lots of legal activity. Can you list off the issues that you're having with this property other than the 6 homicides and 500 gunshots? What are the citations that we're going through here?
We can, and that's certainly in the court filing as well. Let me check on who. Luke might want to be the best one to start with that. Or Commander. Sorry.
Sure. Basically what's happening is you have such a high volume of individuals gathering that are engaged in criminal activity, and all of the businesses around, the surrounding businesses, are impacted. Our citations range from traffic enforcement when we're looking for stolen vehicles, because a lot of times there are stolen vehicles that frequent the Adams Market, criminal trespass, blocking the sidewalk. There's fires being started in the roadway. There's fires being started on the sidewalk. Sidewalks are obstructed. People can't walk by. And this happens every day. So our officers are making arrests and citations and seizures every day, it seems like, and it's not stopping. So as the area commander, I'm appreciative of the action that the city of Albuquerque has taken.
And Commander, when you're talking to the owners of this business, why do they not want to work with you?
I haven't had any specific conversations with the owner. I can tell you we have had conversations with management multiple times, with security, their hired security multiple times. And again, it's clear to me at my level that they are not just turning a blind eye or complicit with what's going on. They are actively engaging in criminal activity.
This is a small thing, but I just want to share. There's a difference between management and owners here. I want to highlight what you said, management.
You know, and I think one thing you need to remember above all is that number there. $98,000, 983. 98,983. You think about that. That is in a department that we're short officers. That's the equivalent of more than one officer assigned to this location per year. So you could look at this. Location is taking up one officer per year for us to be able to manage it. So it is alarming to know how much resources and time our officers are spending at this location.
Any other questions?
So we know that that part of the city is really bad with crime. What are you guys going to do if you guys close this, but then they move somewhere else? Is it the same plan again? Try to work with the owners of another store or something?
I think that's important that we stay proactive. The mayor mentioned it. We have an ADAPT program that works with a lot of businesses, great. And I think there's other things, other angles that we're going to be looking at in the future, but we will continue to seek out locations that are committing crime, and we will continue to address them, and hopefully each time we could address it at the lowest level possible, and in extreme circumstances it may elevate to a higher level.
Yeah, but let me counter it just to say and add really quickly. I think the narrative that this part of town has crime, right? I think that's sort of an easy answer if you watch the 6 o'clock news every night. But the answer is every part of town has crime in a different way. Everybody sees something in their neighborhood that doesn't feel right. But allowing something like this to happen means that the neighbors next door can't run their business and be successful too. We're talking about a neighborhood that very publicly is going to lose a very large grocery store here in the next few months. This store is a food source, not a great one, but could be and has been in the past when we had better operators. These folks, there are legitimate businesses that need to be here that are welcome to stay and work with us and do the things that need to be done. But what happens is, if you happen to be a person who lives in this block, who lives in this neighborhood, it's not just that that's happening down the street. It means that, as we were just saying, it means that it's too scary for you and your kids to walk to the bus stop so that you can get to your job, to get to work. It's too scary for somebody to open the vacant business next door and provide something positive. So we want something good at this intersection. It's an incredibly busy intersection in the city. But these people are making it hard for the legitimate folks to do their job. And imagine if you got up every morning and went to work next door to this, imagining what's going to happen to me. There's no way your customers are going to come to your store. And so this is a way for us to work with our good property owners to identify the bad ones. And I would love to see, and the mayor's right, the owner here is not the operator. But the owner's going to have to take some responsibility and have some hard conversations because they can't allow this to continue to happen. And they have an opportunity here to bring in a good operator and turn this around. And part of that is being there. But if they're not willing to, if the management's not willing to do it, we have to step in on behalf of all the people that we serve. And this happens in every part of the city, in every sector in the city in different ways. And our ADAPT team has worked with more than 1,200 properties in different ways around the city in the last few years. This is just one of those that rises to the top because they just ignore us and don't want to work with us. So we're going to make our presence known a little louder.
Pat, it was touched on a little bit, but can you talk about what's being presented to City Council tomorrow in detail?
I'm going to let the mayor's office announce that tomorrow afternoon. But here's sort of the big picture, right? For those of you who were around last year, or a few years ago, when we worked on the 7-Eleven properties in Southeast that just had habitual problems, right? What our nuisance ordinance says is we don't go after your business license if someone happens to walk into your parking lot with a stolen car, or even if there happens to be a serious robbery in your parking lot. But if it happens every day and it's kind of hard for you to ignore it and you're not doing anything proactive, we accumulate all those calls and put you on top of a list, and then instead of prosecuting you for one or two, or instead of holding the business accountable for one thing that happens that someone else did on their property, we put all that together and say you're an attractive nuisance, you're inviting people to do this, and you have to clean it up. What that nuisance ordinance will do now is that we're going to add a city component. What it used to happen was it has to come to the city council, it has to go to district court, it has to go to metro court, and then that gets lost in the court cases that take months to resolve, and there's not much we can do. Our new ordinance, working with the administration, is going to give us a much faster track, a city civil option that we can address those issues much more quickly with operators, hopefully at a much lower level, before they accumulate 500 calls at one location in a year. But that's kind of where we are. Like, if we can't, we've got to get to something where on the third or fourth time we have some real teeth to help you so that you don't end up in this situation if you're a bad operator.
Chief, we spoke to the managers. Is there any reason why the owners haven't been spoken to, why they haven't changed management? I'm sure that's questions your officers have asked, but can you elaborate on that?
Luke, do you have any details on your guys' relationship with the businesses and owners, or the management, how you guys work with them? I don't know what legal's done also, because there's been.
Yeah, currently right now, legal is in conversations with the owner. I have not had any conversations with the owner. Again, we have worked with, or attempted to work with management and attempted to let management know numerous times throughout the last couple of years how these issues need to stop and how the quality of life for all the surrounding businesses is being affected and how the criminal activity is just getting worse.
Gene, do you guys have anything with ADAPT, who they've worked with? Because I know that this went through an ADAPT level beforehand. Andrew?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you guys have anything with more to add to that with who you guys have worked with? Because this program has gone through ADAPT and other processes. So do you guys have anything to add with who we've worked with and how that's looked in the past?
So when we went through the ADAPT program, we initially reached out to the property.
Do you mind stepping up so the microphone first? Thank you.
They're going to put you on the spot.
It's one of our city attorneys. Sorry, not a press conference guy. When the property initially went through the ADAPT program, the first step was we reached out to the actual ownership of the property rather than the management, which is ADAPT's standard practice. Once we did, the property owner relayed us to the management and had them take care of everything that the ADAPT program asked. And the property ownership wanted to stay out of it and just have the management deal with the city and all of what ADAPT was asking and what we were trying to get changed on the property.
Are the owners not local?
I do not believe so.
Any other questions?
I have a question on an unrelated topic for the chief.
Okay, do you want to do that after Chief?
Yes, we got after. But I think the important thing is, although our commander hasn't worked directly with the owner, through the processes before that we're talking about that haven't worked, they have worked with the owner, and that's one of the concerns is obviously the owner hasn't stepped in. And that's what we're asking, is that we're asking owners to take more ownership over their properties and ensure that they're good owners and that their tenants are doing everything to keep communities safe for not only those people who frequent that location, but the surrounding neighbors that are being impacted.